Hello, I'm Steve Barg, City Administrator for the City of Marshfield. Welcome to another edition of our post-council meeting news conference. That's where we talk about the events and the issues discussed at the last council meeting. In this case, that would have been the meeting on Tuesday, July 13th. And as always, I'm joined by Mike Warren from WDLB. Kris Leonhardt is here as well. And so I'll turn it over to Mike and we'll start the show.
All right, thank you, Steve. So the meeting on July 13th, the big highlight for me was, and there are a number of things we'll get to, but I think I want to start first and foremost with a presentation that the council heard on forms of city government in Wisconsin. It was presented by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, an interesting presentation. The council basically just heard the presentation, had no discussion or action taken or anything, but heard a very interesting presentation. Maybe just talk about what the presentation was and why it was made at this time.
Yeah, and I apologize first, Mike. I thought I'd put that in your packet for this morning. I didn't. I do have the slides I can give you earlier that Kurt Wojcinski from the League presented. It was only about a half a dozen slides. But the main premise, it goes back to the spring, if you recall, when the mayor was removed from office. And at that point, the council looked at their options. They ultimately decided to have the council president sort of do the baseline duties of the mayor through April 20 of 22, when the next municipal election would be held for mayor. And Nick Fischel's doing that right now. But there was discussion at that point about other forms of government. I was specifically requested to get someone here to speak on that because we have the weak mayor administrative form of government, but that's not the only form in Wisconsin, in the villages and cities across the state. So Kurt Wojcinski, the Deputy Director of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, and Jerry DeShane, the Executive Director, made a presentation. There really are four different options in Wisconsin. We have the two under the mayor administrative form, if you will. I shouldn't really say administrator because one doesn't involve an administrator. You have a weak mayor and an administrator. That's what we have here, where we have a part-time mayor. And again, weak doesn't mean that you're not doing significant things. It means that you have limited formal powers. And then there's a strong mayor system, which is typically without a person like me. And you find that in Wisconsin Rapids, Stevens Point, and Wausau, among other cities where they've decided that they would elect a mayor, but that person, besides being the legislative head, is also the day-to-day chief administrative officer of the city, doing work similar to what I do for the city of Marshfield. So it's kind of an all-in-one type of proposition. Now, he did indicate that the vast majority of cities in Wisconsin have a mayor form of government. There are very few that don't. There are 10 cities, and he didn't mention it, but I think there's 9 villages that use the council manager form of government. That's where more authority is given to someone in my position. It's an elevation from an administrator to a manager. If I were a manager, I could hire and fire department heads with no council involvement. I can't. That ultimately all runs through the council for those types of decisions. In some communities, a manager can spend greater amounts of money without council approval than I could. And there's some other differences as well. In most of those cities, I believe that there isn't a mayor per se, although somebody runs the meetings. In some cities, there is a mayor who is kind of a figurehead, but the relationship is deemed to be directly between the council and the manager. And then there's one called commission, which no cities in Wisconsin currently have. For Minnesota, where I grew up, they do have some cities, I think, that have the commission form. That's where there would be members of the council. Let's say Tom Butke from District 9. He might be chosen to be the head over the public works area. So he would have a distinct specific role in terms of overseeing public works that he would relate back to the council, and others would be overseeing different areas of the city. That's not generally, I don't see that making a comeback. So I see the three main things to be strong mayor, weak mayor administrator, and council manager. And again, just to remind everybody watching us today, there was no pretense that the city is going to look at taking a different route, but they wanted to see during this 12-month pause period what the other ideas out there and see if they have merit.
So it was more or less a fact-finding presentation. I mean, does the council plan on having a discussion on this and taking some sort of action, whether it's for or against a different form of government at this point? How far did they take this issue?
Well, oftentimes, Mike, when the council hears a presentation, I might follow up and say, you know, it's been 4 weeks. Do you have anything you want done with that? Do you want to see it brought forward as a discussion item or even an action item? in this case, since it would affect me personally, or could affect me personally in my role with the city, I won't be doing that. I'll be waiting to see if a member of the council wants to look at more data or more information about one of those options, and they can drive that. If we end up going the council manager form, I didn't say that in my first comments, but that would require a charter ordinance, and it would also, I think, lead to a referendum. I'm not sure if you realize it, but since I've been here in 11 years in Marshfield, there have been referendums a couple of times around us. In fact, Wausau was probably the most recent one, where they had a referendum on whether they wanted to go from the strong mayor form of government to the weak mayor with the city administrator. And I think it was a non-binding referendum, but it failed. Close, but it was, I think, 52 to 48% in favor of keeping their current form of government. But at the point that we're talking, if we went to a council manager form of government, I believe the referendum would probably be binding.
Okay. Do you have anything on that? Anything else on that topic?
No, I'll provide those slides if you don't have them. I think they were shown at the meeting, but not part of the official packet.
Okay. Yeah, and I've got the screenshots of them from the meeting, and it was interesting to hear that the one we have now, the form of government we have now in Marshfield, is the default form of government. I guess if you don't pick one, this is the one that's given to you. And like you said, it's basically the most common form of government that there is in the state.
Yeah, I think 180 out of 190 cities have, one form or other of the mayor type of government. Yeah, so, I tried to get him to, this sounds like a bad thing when I say I tried to get somebody to say something, but I did ask Kurt and Jerry if they could comment on the pros and cons of each type, and they made it very clear that it's really what a community wants. In a council manager form of government, I know some people say that there's too much power in an unelected bureaucrat, which would be somebody in the manager position. Others say that that's a positive because you've got a professional manager with more authority, somebody who's really experienced and educated to do some things. There's pros and cons to every form.
Well, and I think he also said that the pro to the manager form is that it's a little more insulated from politics.
It is.
Because of the autonomy given to a manager versus an administrator. But he also said, I found it interesting, he said nobody's doing it anymore.
No, I know people are not flocking to that form of government. I think part of the reason is because citizens believe, this is what I've heard, and this is what came up in the vote in Wausau, they believe that they have more impact on their local government when they can call someone like a mayor who they know is, I voted for you, now you need to get this done. And they don't have that kind of rapport with someone in my shoes.
Everything. Okay. All right. Also noted that now there was a request to approve providing city email accounts to members of certain city boards and commissions. Was that on the agenda?
It was, and it was discussed quite a bit. There's, again, a memo at the back of your packet. This has been talked about before. Back in 2019, there was a presentation made to us, I think it was by somebody from the UW system, about some different issues that committees and councils should be aware of with respect to open records, open meetings laws, those types of things. And it came up at that time, back in September of 2019, would it be helpful for the members of our committees, boards, and commissions to have city email accounts? Because open records is a daunting thing sometimes. We've gone through it recently with the Fire and Police Commission, where there have been requests made of me that I've had to send out letters and emails to these people and say, look, you need to give me all the emails you have about this topic from this date to that date. Well, if some of the members, they feel kind of infringed upon by their own personal email accounts, but what if they accidentally deleted them? What if they don't have them anymore? Are they going to get in trouble? So the thought has come up, what if these committees had city email accounts? Well, we looked at that, and of course there's a cost with it, for all the different users and all the virus protection and the archiving that we need. And I came up with this idea that the best idea, at least to start with would be to give city email accounts to the boards and commissions that have some level of autonomy on their own. They can make decisions apart from the council based on either state law or based upon city code. So I came up with 4 of them: Economic Development Board, the Ethics Board, the Fire and Police Commission, and the Plan Commission. They all can take actions of some sort that don't require council approval. So the council seemed supportive of this, back in April when I broached the idea. So when I nailed down the committees and boards, they felt good about it. The one question that came up, though, is, would this be required of these people or not? I was proposing it would be voluntary. The whole idea being that, if you serve on the Fire and Police Commission and you're concerned about having your own personal email account brought into the mix on records requests, this would give you some separation from that and some assurance that no matter if you accidentally lost your emails or something, that the city's IT department would have them for the requesting party. But there are members of the council, a couple in particular, who said, if we're going to do this, we got to make it mandatory. We got to require that these commission and board members take our city email accounts to insulate us as well in these types of circumstances. And that carried the day in the end. At the end of the day, they voted that, and they were pretty clear about this, that they want to see this be a requirement. So our technology department's working on this right now. By mid-August, we suspect the roughly 20 members of these four bodies that don't already have it as council members will be required to have city email accounts.
And no discussion about expanding it at this point? I mean, at some point, will you expand it to the other? I mean, these are commissions, like you said. Commissions work a little differently than committees. There's a distinction there, but no indication it would expand beyond the commissions.
It was brought up.
Yeah.
It was brought up and discussed. The thought being, why would we limit it to these four? And again, I tried to articulate as best I could that if you're a member of the Park, Recreation, and Forestry Committee or the Historic Preservation Committee, you really can't take actions that don't require approval up the ladder. All you're really doing is recommending to other bodies and ultimately through the council process that certain actions be taken. But there is still the potential concern. What if members of those committees are writing back and forth to one another, or if they're writing to members of the public, or they're writing to city staff in ways that could draw them into records requests, So one of the things we really need to do is to articulate to all the committees, boards, and commissions to use email as sparingly as possible. The other thing we're going to have to tell them too is if you do things by text or Facebook message, for example, you've got to retain those records. We've been getting open records requests lately that have been asking for people's text messages and Facebook Messenger. And that wasn't the case 3 or 4 years ago. So these requests are getting broader. We need to let both the members who will be getting city email accounts and those who won't know that that they're responsible for some of these records. And this is, potentially serious. We don't want to scare them, but we want them to be on top of it.
All right, so these are mandatory. So I'm sure these commission members will be told, at some point that, look, you're going to be getting this city email account. Now, are those monitored? In other words, they're on some kind of server, and I'm sure people at City Hall could go on that server at any point and randomly monitor exchanges between these commission members, whether there's an open records request or not.
Theoretically true. I don't know what circumstances we would do that under, but theoretically possible. I think it's the main thing is that, we respond to open records requests and we don't even have to call or contact these people. We'll just have the records at our fingertip to provide, subject to state law if there has to be redacting or whatever. But the other concern that was brought up, to be honest with you, was some people don't want to have more technology than they need. And Josh Miller has said this to me, the Development Services Director. He works with two of these bodies, the Plan Commission and the Economic Development Board. And his thought is that some of them might think, look, I don't want another email account. I'm already juggling enough things. I don't want to go on to now I have to go on to my city email. Now I go back to my other email. Theoretically, again, and I use that word a lot, they really should only be interacting briefly with us. We send them an agenda by email. They respond if they have a question or say that they can't make Tuesday night at 7, they're going out of town. There really ought not be a lot of back and forth, certainly not talking about, hey, I'm going to vote for this. What do you think? But still, there's enough back and forth where we think it would be helpful for us to have those here.
Well, and that's where the ethics board comes in. They are supposed to sort of educate these. Is that happening with this new ethics board, educating these other commissions and committees about these sorts of exchanges, or are they only there to look at any potential violations? They're not supposed to be the sort of education arm of these other commissions or committees?
So far, the focus, and they're early on, they're still trying to get their feet wet, in what they're supposed to do. But so far, the focus has been on possible violations. And really, they haven't had a complaint that's come to them yet seeking some type of action against someone. It's only been the positive, the proactive ones where a couple of people have come and said, you know what, This is what's going on here. I'm making this up now, but my brother-in-law works for this company and I'm on this body and I might have to vote on it. Trying to get an advanced ruling, finger in the wind, if you will, so they don't get into trouble. And we want as much of that as we can. Ultimately, though, training with boards and commissions would be a really good idea, and open record stuff could come into play. So I expect to maybe see that possibly down the road.
Anything else on that one?
I don't think so. We'll monitor it. If there's a need to extend it to other committees, we can do that.
Okay, all right. There were a couple of, and I think we've talked about, well, at least one of these before, and now I don't see it on the agenda. There was a zoning issue that got approved, right, by the council that had been under some scrutiny in terms of what, I don't know if it was mixed use or just a straight change in zoning for a particular residence that is doing some in-home childcare or something?
Yeah, it's actually on the agenda on the middle of page 2. It's item L, and I didn't put it in your packet. I wasn't sure if that was a topic you're going to want to cover, but you're right. At the first reading back on July 13th, there was, June, whatever the date was, there was discussion about that. And oftentimes rezonings go through and they sail. The plan commission's recommended approval and, it's all good. But there's some concern about this daycare. And it does bring up another issue I want to talk about, because I think the council was basically okay with the idea that this be rezoned to a designation that would allow for daycare. But the fact that this person is talking about 24 children made them a little bit nervous in what currently is a single-family neighborhood. Now, there used to be a daycare, I guess, at this location before, and then it lapsed because of not being used for a while. What Josh Miller tried to do a little bit, and we need to do more of with our council, is just remind them the difference between the zoning being changed and also getting a conditional use permit for the use. So at some point now, Mike, being that the council did approve changing this from SR3 to MR12, that makes it possible for this daycare. But there's still going to be another hearing where the neighbors get letters. They can come into this room and they can say, you know what? I'm concerned about 24 students be allowed. What about the parking? What about the traffic? Is there going to be noise out in the yard when I'm trying to do my landscaping? They can bring up those kind of questions as part of the conditional use process. But right now, when you're doing zoning, you really aren't supposed to talk about how many kids are you going to have and, have you done daycare before? So the zoning was approved, but I think there'll probably be a little bit of interest in the future when this person comes formally through to get the conditional use permit to actually run a daycare with 24 students at that location.
Yeah, because that's a plan commission issue, or those issues are those, right, conditional uses. When you're talking zoning, this came up recently in another zoning issue, and I can't remember what the specific one was, but the alderman kept bringing up the issues involved in a conditional use permit, which has nothing to do with zoning, right? They're two separate issues, and sometimes there's that gray area, some crossover on some of those issues, which really shouldn't or isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, and I understand council members, their desire to look ahead. In other words, in this case, I don't know if I want 24 children to be in this, this residence, being covered by daycare. It's hard, and I imagine, for them to separate that from the fact that would a daycare of some kind be a potential use here? Would it be possible to allow for it by modifying the zoning designation and to look down the road? We've seen that before with people talking about a housing development. And we're asking to see if they'd rezone the property to allow duplexes in a development. And then they start talking about, well, what are these going to look like? What size are these duplexes going to be, and these kind of things. And now you're getting ahead of yourself into the next phase of the review process, which will go to, the plan commission when you start getting into some of the needs. And I'm getting ahead of myself too, but it's hard to focus on just simply the topic of rezoning a property to make something possible. I get that.
Anything? Okay, anything else on that?
No, I think that was approved, but I think it was, and it was good to have the applicant here. It's always nice to see the applicant showing interest in being here for questions. But again, that may have possibly, Mike, made people think about the particulars of her plan beyond just making it possible to have some type of daycare facility there.
A couple of consent agenda items I noticed when they approved the consent agenda went through. I'll note a couple of them. The housing subdivision that we've recently talked about, and you can maybe talk on that, but also one that was new to me, shared site with Wood County Highway Department. Can you note those along with, I know there was another one having to do with Wenzel Plaza, but I was more interested in at least for now, the Wood County Highway Department issue and the subdivision issue.
Yeah, let me start with the subdivision. I mean, we were all kind of waiting, to use the famous phrase, with bated breath to see what we got in terms of proposals to build the street, sewer, water, all the infrastructure, because, our plans have been predicated on the fact that we could get the infrastructure installed for a certain dollar amount. And I think you've probably heard as much as I have, inflation is growing. People see it at the grocery store, they see it at the gas pump. Well, apparently the costs in general are rising for this type of construction work as well. So we were wondering what we would do if in fact we were blown out of the water by the low bid being beyond what we expected. If you look at what I put in that packet, there were only 2 bids. We were hoping for, 4 or 5, but one of them was particularly excellent. It's from Earth Incorporated out of Arpin. They've done a ton of work, obviously, for the city over the years. And if you put their bid of $843,000 together with some of the other costs and then tack it on some additional buffer for engineering and contingency, we came up at $1,030,000, which was, within a few $1,000s of the estimate. So it's now a go. I mean, right now, while we plan on this, the council approved this, the work is going on. We think that the infrastructure will take about 90 days to build. The expectation is still that by late October, we will have the infrastructure in the ground. We'll be ready to move from the pre-sale agreements to actually selling the lots. And in 2022, you will likely see construction on these 23 parcels that have been created out there by Fifth and Lincoln. It's exciting. It's, 23 lots does not solve our housing dilemma. The new tax increment financing district is being talked about to the east, will help some, but we are excited to see some lots available for building. That'll be a good thing. Any questions on that before I go into the?
No, then the other one was, Wood County Highway Department shared site?
Yeah, we've been talking for a while about relocating the Public Works garage out of downtown. And I think most people realize that if you played that old game Sim City or you did any city planning with a vacant field, you wouldn't put a Public Works garage with snow plows and big trucks in your downtown area. So we'd like to relocate if we can make it work. And the council's kind of grabbed onto that, but the price tag is obviously pretty high. So one of the things that's come up, Dan Kinneck, our Public Works Director, has done a great job of having contact with Wood County officials. And it may be possible for the city to end up sharing a site down in the South Galvin area with the Wood County Highway Department. So what we're doing right now is we're getting a consultant that we've used before to look at the needs of our street department, Barrientos, and that'll be good because they have a starting point for what we're looking for, trying to see if there's some way there's a workable solution to have us co-locate on a single property. Now, there's going to be 3 ways that they're going to look at this. Number one, what if we're on the same site, but we're kind of like, independent? In other words, we're living together, but we're not sharing the same space. Maybe we share some gas pumps or whatever, but it's 2 separate uses. Number 2 would be if we have the building, we're in the same building, it's connected, but we still have some separation. And then 3, I believe, is a more merged use of the two entities. So anyway, the proposal you have is to look at these 3 alternatives. Barrientos is a good company. It's about just under $30,000 for the planning study. Dan Kinneck, our Public Works Director, says that they probably should finish the study during calendar year 2021. And that will give us an idea whether or not this is a real possibility.
And so the idea is to get the street department out of its current city garage location?
Yeah, we wanted to redevelop the northwest part of our downtown, as I call it. And, we've got an exciting opportunity if we can relocate the Public Works garage. We are talking with Weinbrenner. They're still looking at ideas of staying in the community, but building somewhere else outside of downtown. So, that does make the possibility of that 2nd Street corridor west of Chestnut Avenue more interesting. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. We don't know if any of this is going to happen, but the needs of our Public Works garage are such that it would be better to have a new site than to try and expand in that same area where they are today. And I do call your attention to, I think it's the third page maybe of the Barrientos proposal in the packet. That does lay out better the three options that I said. The first one, I'm pretty clear about each agency will have separate buildings on the same property. The second one, there'd be some shared functions with the main garage being split between the two agencies. And then the third one would be shared yard functions with the main garage layout being blended. The two would share that, the two entities, Wood County Highway Department and the City of Marshfield Public Works. So there's opportunities. What the cost is going to be, what the feasibility is going to be, we don't know, but it's worth exploring.
Okay. And then there was a third item on the consent agenda that was sort of highlighted, approve wage scale for Wenzel Family Plaza events and program coordinator position. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is the continuing step-by-step moves to get the position held by Nikki Anderson onto the city's, org chart. She would be reporting to Justin Casperson. She'd be a member of the Parks and Recreation Department. So without all of our other positions, and this is the same one here, we had to send it out to McGrath, they're a compensation consultant, to say, well, where would this rank? We can't just pay this person what they've been paid as a Wenzel Family Plaza coordinator. So let's get a job description that we can all agree on, send it to our compensation consultant. They have to look at everything. They have to look at not only what this person does, how it compares to what they can find from other cities, how it compares internally to what other staff make here at the City of Marshfield. They came up with pay grade 129. You see the list there, the starting position and going up through the steps as the individual would progress. So this is just one more step in the process. It's believed right now, Mike, that this will happen around the first of the year. And again, the new funding plan for this will be 40% of her salary would be paid by Visit Marshfield, 40% by the Economic Development Board, and then 20% by the city proper.
Okay.
And there would be a new title, Programming and Events Coordinator. Maybe expanding a little bit what she's been doing, but certainly Wenzel Family Plaza would be the focus of that position.
All right. And there were a couple of budget resolutions I noted. Did one have to do with the subdivision?
Yeah, they both, the ones I marked, both have to do with the subdivision. And I marked them because it's noteworthy. There's been a little bit of heartburn along the way about how much is being contributed by the city and the Economic Development Fund toward the city subdivision. You look at item N, and that's a transfer of $900,000 from the Economic Development Fund, or we call it the 205 Fund, toward this project. And right now that fund only has about $1.1 million. So it's the lion's share of the fund. However, the lot sales monies will be going back that direction. And we also expect this number to come down because we are seeking and getting some success with other entities participating. Wood County, we're looking at Marshfield Utilities, they've contributed some monies. Wastewater is contributing monies because obviously the wastewater utility benefits from new homes being built and the fees that are going to be paid. So that number will come down from 900,000, I believe. But anyway, that one, and then the budget resolution after it was just talking about the many pieces. If you look at it, it's kind of contorted. There's 6 different parts to this resolution, but how the monies have to be moved around internally to make this whole thing work. The main thing is the city is making an investment. We're not hiding it. I know a couple of our council members, one in particular, have some concerns, and I totally respect and appreciate those. It's just believed at this time that this is what we need to jumpstart housing, where we've been criticized for a little while now about not having lots to build on, and this will at least be a good start toward meeting that housing need.
Well, I brought those up because there have not been, so budget resolution means it's not in the current year's city budget that was approved last fall. Is that correct?
Well, it means it needs to be transferred from somewhere to make it work. So in other words, forgetting this particular plan, let's say the police department had $25,000 in its approved budget for 2021 to do a certain thing. And, it became aware of the fact that they weren't going to expend those monies. But the Park and Recreation Department could sure use $25,000 to upgrade the park equipment at Breezy Park. They might do a budget resolution to transfer $25,000 from that account code in the police department budget to the Park and Recreation Department. So it's not like we're making up money or discussing money that didn't exist before. It's transferring funds from one account to another to make the expenditure possible. In this case, it's transferring money from the Economic Development Fund to the Capital Projects Fund to be able to, lawfully expend them.
Okay, because the point I was going to bring up, it was there have not been very many of these this year, so through 6.5 months, I mean, a lot of times if you're seeing a lot of budget resolutions, it maybe means you're going outside of the approved budget, but it looks like you pretty much hit the mark on the budget that was approved last fall for the current year, without having to deviate too far from that, right?
Well, yeah, and we've played it pretty tight. I think most people know, certainly including you and Kris, that we've had some budget challenges the last couple of years. We had a tax rate increase that was more than we normally would want to have. And so we've been watching our dollars pretty closely. So the fact that one department might be, having funds that they don't expect to expend anymore, we don't necessarily, we scrutinize if those dollars are to be repurposed. We always do that. We're not flippant here, but if we can save money and if we can end up with a surplus at the end of the year, that's where we're at right now with our structural budget deficits. That's a good thing. It puts us in a better position to start the next year.
Anything else on those?
On those budget resolutions?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So then the other one I saw was exception to an ordinance for Hub City Days car show presented by the acting police chief.
Yeah, and what I think is noteworthy on this is not that this passed, although a couple of years ago, we weren't allowing open containers for anything, on the streets and sidewalks, but we've done this before for the car show. The noteworthy thing is that behind this, the acting police chief, Pat Zepps, is expecting to soon bring forward a request to the council for an ordinance amendment to give him some authority to approve these without having to bring them forward individually. Just this year, we've seen this one, the wine walk, all these things for different events. And, a lot of them are daytime events where there's not a lot of problems expected from public intoxication or something. So, they're pretty routine. So the thought is, could we give the police chief some authority that if it met certain parameters, we wouldn't have to parade these in front of the council. Now, I don't know what the council will think about that when that day comes, when that ordinance is brought forward. But the council has been pretty receptive to this. There's one member who has not voted for these, and I totally understand her perspective on that, the concern about people being outside of buildings, out on the sidewalks or wherever with open containers. But we haven't had any problems come from this so far in terms of bad incidents or intoxication. So we'll see when that day comes if the council is willing to give authority more broadly to the police chief.
All right. Also, I noticed there were 3 closed session items: Marshfield Clinic Health System airspace lease, Marshfield Clinic real estate tax, and request to purchase residential lot in Daniels Addition. Anything out of closed session on any of those issues?
The only thing we took action on in open session, Mike, is the airspace lease. It's not a highly controversial thing, although we've talked about it a couple times. That's because the clinic wants to build another skywalk connecting the east wing to the hospital. And you might think, well, what's that of the city's business? Well, it's going over a city right away. And that brings up possibilities of liability or insurance or, those types of things. So, and the city does get some small amount of money for that. But the main thing is we want to make sure that there's liability coverage in case something would happen, that somebody would get injured or, those types of things. So it was given a thumbs up in open session, dependent upon us modifying the ordinance. There's some ordinance modification that needs to be made to allow this kind of thing to happen now. I don't know what happened previously, but it has to do with encroachments into the city right away. So what you'll see on July 27th is going to be an ordinance that, if it's passed, is going to allow us to sign this lease. But we've agreed on the particulars with the clinic. And like I said, to the average person looking at that lease, there's not a whole lot. It's very legalese, and it just dots the I's and crosses the T's. With respect to the lot in Daniels Addition, the new city subdivision, I may have touched on this before with you. I know I did on council preview once with Tom Laux. This is, I think, the third meeting in a row we've had something like this on the agenda. We have a set of guidelines and standards for people who want to buy a lot in Daniel's edition. And it talks about, the minimum size of the home and some things. And periodically, somebody will come forward, and we've seen this now 3 council meetings in a row where they say, you know what, I'd love to buy one of these lots. I'd love to sign a pre-sale agreement. Would it be possible for me to slightly deviate from your requirements? Maybe I want to have a home that's slightly different than what you're describing, or maybe the value will be, whatever it is. I mean, they're not proposing to put up poor homes, but they want a slight deviation from the requirements in the pre-sale. I don't know if you've seen the pre-sale agreements. I can certainly share one with you if you haven't. And so then the council talks about it, and they say, well, you can get back to that person and say, yes, if they meet all the requirements, the other requirements, we'll do this, or no, we're not going to bend on that. We want to hold to that guideline or standard. Those are the kind of things we've been hearing in these closed session discussions. There was no action out of closed session. It's just some discussion and some guidance to the Development Services Director in terms of what they may accept, as we look at signing on with people. The third item I really can't talk much about. I think you know that the clinic has been seeking a tax exemption for the East Wing and the main building. These are valued at, together $112 million, which is 7% of the city's tax base. So if those were taken off the tax rolls, that would be a significant event. But we're early on and not sure where this is going to go. So we're continuing to look at it, to talk with our legal counsel, and interact with the clinic representatives as well along the way. But we're not in litigation with them right now. They have just filed this claim looking for tax exemption.
How many of the Daniel's edition lots have been pre-sold, do you know?
The last count I heard was 13 out of 23. So we're past the 50% mark. Still trying to sell them as much as we can. Encourage anybody listening to us or seeing this program, Mike, to contact the city, talk to the Development Services Department, get a sense of what is expected, maybe get a look at the pre-sale agreement, see if you'd be interested in a home where you needed to build to these requirements. Love to talk to you.
Okay, that's all I had on my list. Anything else out of the meeting significant?
I don't think so. We've had a few meetings now that have been relatively quiet in comparison to earlier in the year when we had some really big issues facing us. We, just to let the public know, we are aware that there's been a slight uptick of COVID-19 cases. Not a great one yet, but we're monitoring this. We have no intention anytime soon of changing how we do business, but we would encourage people to keep tabs on it for their own personal health and for interacting with us, and we'll see if that needs to be revisited at some point. I hope not. I hope we're pulling out for good. I think everybody does. And now we're really starting the budget process at the staff level. It will be a little while before our elected officials get engaged with us, but that's going to be something significant as we head into September.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just about to say, well, in another program where we didn't mention COVID.
Yeah, we're all still monitoring, but you're right. It's been pretty quiet. We have this Delta variant they're talking about. Is that going to take hold and move our direction? But it sure has been nice, even if we end up having to deal with it again, to have this time period where we could have Dairy Fest, we could have Hub City Days coming up. People can get out and have fun during the summer in Wisconsin. Summer is very short, and so it's been nice.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of Kris Leonhardt from the Hub City Times and Mike Warren from WDLB, I want to thank you for tuning in today on this post-council meeting news conference, again, from the meeting on July 13th. We will reconvene later in this month and recap the meeting from July 27th. I'm Steve Barg, City Administrator. Have a great day.